Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and get you the knowledge that matters. Today, we're plunging into a really fascinating, sometimes tricky area. It's where personal rights meet school authority. The big question, right? How far can schools actually go when searching students, especially for things like, drugs or other banned items?
Yeah,
This deep dive is for you, really, to help make sense of this complex legal stuff.
exactly. And to really get a handle on it, we're zeroing in on a specific, really crucial U.S. Supreme Court case. It's Safford Unified School District Number 1 v. Reading from 2009. We've got the key sources here, mainly the court's majority opinion, which Justice Souter wrote, but also, importantly, the dissenting opinions from Justices Thomas and Scalia. Gives you the whole picture, the different viewpoints.
Yeah, that's a solid foundation, and I think the level of detail the court went into might actually surprise you. So, our mission today, pretty clear. We're going to unpack Savannah Redding's story, what actually happened. Then we'll dissect the legal arguments, how they reached the Supreme Court, and, maybe most importantly, explore what this ruling means today for students, for schools, for the Fourth Amendment in that setting.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with Savannah. All right, so let's picture this. Savannah Redding, she's 13 years old, an 8th grader in Safford, Arizona. And one day, back in October 2003, her day gets completely turned upside down. She gets pulled aside based on an accusation from another student, Marissa Glines, the claim that Savannah was giving out prescription-strength ibuprofen, like 400 milligram Advil, 200 milligram naproxen.
Now, obviously, these aren't, illegal street drugs,
Yeah.
but they are controlled substances on school grounds if you don't have permission. Handing them out was against school rules.
Definitely a violation. So this accusation kicks off an investigation. School officials get involved. Assistant Principal Carrie Wilson and Administrative Assistant Helen Romero. They bring Savannah into the off-rip.
And based on that tip from Marissa, who said Savannah gave her pills and had more, maybe in her day planner, they start a search. First step, they go through Savannah's backpack.
Thoroughly. And find nothing at all. So they move on to her outer clothing. Her jacket, socks, shoes came off, so she's just in her stretch pants and t-shirt at this point.
Hmm.
And it's really key here. This first search, less intrusive, it also found absolutely 0 pills.
Right, and this is where it gets really intense and, frankly, controversial. After finding nothing in the backpack, nothing in the outer clothes, the officials decide to escalate things. Big time. They involve the school nurse, Peggy Schwallier. And in the nurse's office, they conduct what's known as a strip search. Savannah had to take off her outer clothes. Then she was told to pull her bra away from her body and her underwear away from her body, basically exposing her breasts and pelvic area for a visual check.
And the result of this incredibly invasive search?
Still nothing. No pills found.
Yeah.
Anywhere. It was, a complete dead end search-wise.
Exactly. No pills, but, well, the search itself was the issue, especially for a 13-year-old. Her parents, understandably, were furious. They sued the school district, sued the officials involved. Their argument was crystal clear. That strip search violated Savannah's Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable searches, and that lawsuit focused on a child's privacy in school. That's what pushed this all the way to the Supreme Court.
Okay, so we have these really stark facts. How did the Supreme Court look at this? Let's start with the majority opinion from Justice Souter. He starts by acknowledging, look, schools are different. They aren't the street. They aren't home. Schools need to keep order, keep kids safe. The court gets that. And he points back to a really key earlier case, New Jersey v. TLO from 1985. That case set the standard.
Right, TLO is fundamental here. Just briefly, that case involved a student caught smoking in the bathroom, denied it. Official searched her purse, found cigarettes, but also marijuana, rolling papers, a list suggesting she was dealing. And the court in TLO said, okay, school officials don't need probable cause like police do. They just need reasonable suspicion to search a student.
That's such a critical difference. Probable cause, that's a high bar. Needs pretty solid evidence. Reasonable suspicion. It's lower. It needs to be based on specific facts. More than just a hunch, but less than probable cause. So applying that, the Safford court said the initial search, the backpack, the outer clothes, that was okay. It was justified by reasonable suspicion based on Marissa's tip.
Exactly. The tip gave them enough reason to suspect Savannah had pills somewhere. But here's the pivot in the majority opinion, why the strip search was unconstitutional. They agreed there was reasonable suspicion she had pills. But crucially, there was no reasonable suspicion that the pills were hidden specifically in her underwear.
Right. The tip didn't say that. Savannah hadn't acted in a way that suggested hiding something there. The first searches found nothing. So there was no specific reason pointing to that very private area.
Precisely. And without that specific link, that individualized suspicion for that location, the search went too far. It crossed the line.
And it wasn't just about the location, was it? The nature of the pills mattered too. Prescription ibuprofen, while against the rules, wasn't like a weapon or, heroin. It wasn't posing a massive immediate danger to everyone.
That's a key point. The court looked at the intrusiveness versus the danger. They reasoned that for something relatively minor, like these pills, you need way more justification to do something as intrusive as a strip search. To go that far, the school would need really strong, specific reasons to think the pills were there in her underwear and that they posed an immediate danger justifying such humiliation.
Which brings us to that term, excessive intrusiveness.
Yes. The court really emphasized the profound humiliation and indignity for a 13-year-old girl. Being forced to expose herself like that in front of adults for pills they didn't even find. It wasn't just a procedural point, it was about the real emotional and psychological impact. The court basically said protecting a student's dignity, especially a young adolescent's, is part of their Fourth Amendment rights, even at school.
Okay, one quick but important legal point the court touched on.
Yeah.
Qualified immunity. This is about whether the individual school officials, Wilson, Romero, Schwalier, could be personally sued for damages.
Right. Qualified immunity protects government officials unless they violate a constitutional right that was clearly established at the time, meaning, should they reasonably have known their actions were illegal based on existing law back in 2003? The Supreme Court didn't definitively answer that for the officials. They sent that specific question back down to the lower courts to figure out.
Makes sense. Now, as you can imagine, not everyone on the court saw it this way. There were some pretty strong dissents, especially from Justices Clarence Thomas and Antonin Scalia. They had a very different take.
Oh, absolutely. Justice Thomas wrote a dissent arguing flat out that the Fourth Amendment wasn't violated at all. He just disagreed fundamentally with how the majority applied that reasonable suspicion standard. His view was basically, if you reasonably suspect a student has banned drugs like these pills, and it's possible those drugs could be hidden in underwear, then the search is okay. Full stop.
So he felt the majority standard was too complex, too difficult for schools.
Yeah, he called it unworkable in practice. He argued school officials need to act quickly, decisively to keep drugs out and maintain safety. He really emphasized the school's need for order and discipline. From his perspective, tackling drug issues, even prescription drug misuse, was essential for a safe learning environment. He seemed to prioritize the school's authority to act, maybe over the individual student's privacy in this specific intrusive context.
Right. Worried about tying schools' hands.
Exactly, and Justice Scalia agreed with Thomas, writing separately to emphasize that point. They both stressed this idea that schools have a special need for safety and a drug-free environment, and that courts shouldn't be too quick to second-guess the decisions administrators make on the ground. So you really see this fundamental clash, don't you, over what reasonable suspicion actually requires for different levels of searches and what counts as excessively intrusive in a school.
Okay, fascinating stuff. So let's bring it back to today. What does this all mean for you? If you're a student, a parent, an educator, what's the practical impact of Safford v. Reading now?
Well, the big takeaway, the bottom line, is this two-tiered standard it cemented. Tier 1, general searches, like a backpack, pockets, outer clothes. Those only need reasonable suspicion, a lower bar. Tier 2, highly intrusive searches, like strip searches. Those need much more. They need specific, individual suspicion pointing to that exact private location. And usually the item needs to pose a pretty significant immediate threat.
So suspicion of having a vape pen might justify searching a backpack, but not automatically justify a strip search to see if it's hidden in underwear.
Exactly. You'd need a very specific reason to believe it's there, and maybe even argue why that vape pen poses such an immediate danger to justify that level of intrusion. It really hammers home context and proportionality. How serious is the suspected rule breaking? How dangerous is the item? Does the search method match the suspicion?
Yeah, that makes sense. And it really highlights that constant tension, doesn't it, between individual privacy, the Fourth Amendment, and the school's job to keep everyone safe and maintain order. It's a balancing act. And you saw schools react to Safford, right? Many updated their search policies to be much clearer about strip searches, often requiring higher administrative approval or even police involvement.
Definitely. It forced a lot of districts to clarify their rules, and it continues to raise these important questions, especially with new tech, like cell phones. If a school reasonably suspects cyberbullying happened on a student's phone, can they search texts and photos? The Safford principles about intrusiveness, location, proportionality, they still apply, but figuring out how they work in digital spaces, that's tricky.
Or even things like locker searches.
Right. Lockers are school property, so the expectation of privacy is lower generally. But still, how intrusive can that search be? Does rummaging through every personal item cross a line? Safford really pushes us to think. How do we protect students' dignity, especially minors, while still letting schools deal effectively with real problems like drugs, bullying, and safety? It's not always easy.
So, wrapping up our deep dive on Safford v. Reading, hopefully you've got a clearer picture now of this really delicate balance. The Supreme Court tried to strike a balance between student privacy and school needs. And as we saw, the disagreements between the justices just underscore how complex these issues really are. It truly drew a line on the most invasive searches.
Yeah, and it shows how the Fourth Amendment isn't static, especially in unique places like schools. Kids' rights are always being debated, refined. We're always trying to find that equilibrium between protecting them and giving schools the authority they need. Safford is still a major touchstone for that debate today.
It really is. And this whole deep dive, looking at Savannah Redding's experience and the court's ruling, it highlights something fundamental. Rights evolve. They get reinterpreted. So here's a thought to leave you with today. Think about technology. It's constantly changing. Students carry powerful computers in their pockets, smartwatches on their wrists, navigate huge digital worlds. How do the principles we talked about today, suspicion, proportionality, intrusiveness, where we draw on privacy lines, how might they apply to these new digital frontiers? It's definitely something worth pondering as we see how these foundational rights keep adapting.